to cut her feet free. Now able to walk, Mary rushed to Michael's side. He had cuts all over his body, and his limbs were swollen and bloody. Even though her hands were still tied behind her back, she was able to cut off the tape over his face.
He just took a deep breath and he said, "Oh, that feels so much better." And I thought, oh, thank God he's alive.
Mary now saw small beams of light moving back and forth. Headlights, which meant they were near a road.
I knew that his life depended on my getting to that highway and getting us some help.
She set off down the gravel track, barefoot.
As I was walking toward the highway, the sun came up. And all of a sudden, this might sound strange, but it was so beautiful. It's the most beautiful sunrise I had ever seen, because I was alive to see it.
When Mary got to the road, Sergeant Williams wasn't the first car she saw. It wasn't even the second. Mary saw dozens of cars pass her, a barefoot woman, zip-tied, still clinging to the knife, before Sergeant Williams finally made his U-turn.
He opened the door and got out, and I said, "Officer, my friend and I were kidnapped in Newport Beach, and they drove us up here in a van and tortured my friend. Please call an ambulance now."
Mary and Michael were taken to a local hospital where Michael was treated for his many injuries. They were about to take him in for surgery, but Mary asked to see him just for a minute. He was tucked into a clean white sheet. His battered and bruised head rested on a pillow.
And you know what he said to me? "Mary, I'm so sorry. Nothing like this ever happens in Newport Beach."
While Michael was in surgery, Mary got checked over by the doctors. Physically, she was fine. She had a few cuts and bruises, but that was it. Local police quickly took an official statement from her, and at 7:37 a.m., the phone at the Newport Beach Police Department rang. It was Kern County calling to say, "A case is coming your way." Ryan Peters was a detective in Newport in 2012. He knows that despite what Michael told Mary, there's plenty of crime in Newport Beach. Still, this was especially brutal.
We get the homicides, we get the murders, we get the fatal car accidents, but an actual kidnapping, torture case left for dead in the desert, no, that's a once-in-a-lifetime case.
Mary had given a statement to the Kern County Police, and now Detective Peters was told the basic details and the address of the victims in Newport. Peters was sent to the Yellow House to start the investigation. At the time, he assumed that it was a robbery gone wrong, that the perpetrators had broken in looking for money or jewelry. He thought that maybe the burglars had discovered the house wasn't empty, panicked, and took Michael and Mary to the desert to get rid of the evidence. But as he observed the scene, he noticed there was no sign of forced entry. There were smears of blood throughout the house, and the beds were messy. But a safe deposit box was untouched, and a sports car in the garage was still there. Detective Peters realized this wasn't a run-of-the-mill burglary gone wrong. This was premeditated, and he began to think of everyone involved as a possible suspect, including Mary, suspiciously unharmed.
Mary Barnes had just moved into the house. Like, she still had her suitcases out with her clothes in it. So if you're so new to the house, are you part of this? Are you a potential suspect? Or are you playing a great victim right now?
And then there was Mary's boyfriend, Bill, who was out of the country while the attack happened, but whose name Peters knew. Bill ran a local poker ring. Nothing illegal, but something Peters would have to look into. He was even suspicious of Michael. If this was a revenge attack, Michael may end up being a suspect in a different, connected case. He knew too little to think anyone was totally innocent. and Detective Peters knew he needed to act quickly. The perpetrators had enough time to drive back to Newport from the desert. They could be planning their next attack already. So he called Deputy District Attorney Matt Murphy.
And he's like, dude, we have a crazy one.
At this stage of the investigation, Matt Murphy's job was to support the detectives. If they needed a warrant or needed to know how to collect evidence in a way that could later help them in court, they went to Matt for advice. Peters filled him in on everything they knew so far: the break-in, the kidnapping, the torture. And by now, there was one new key detail. Officers were fanned out across the desert, searching for Michael's penis.
And, with every update, it's like, they haven't found it, they haven't found it, they haven't found it. And then it occurs to me, these friggin' guys took it with them. Which is like, think about that. It's not enough just to cut off a guy's penis. They want to make sure that he has no chance it's ever reattached. And that represents a level of sadism and cruelty that, honestly, I prosecuted 13 different cases that satisfied the FBI definition of serial killer. I never saw anything like this.
From Mary's interview, police knew the timeline of the attack. They knew there were 3 perpetrators who wore masks and had possibly fake accents. They knew those perpetrators believed Michael had $1 million. They knew the how of the crime, but not the who or the why. So Detective Peters thought Michael might be able to answer some of these questions. He had been interviewed in the hours after the attack by local police, but 3 days later, on October 5th, Peters drove up to the hospital in Mojave to interview him again. The detective was looking for answers, but Michael didn't have any.
Michael is telling me he doesn't know who it is. And Michael is telling me he never had $1 million cash. And yet they believed him to have $1 million cash.
They interview Michael, who's like, guys, I pay my bills. I have no enemies. I'm nice to people. I've never slept with anybody's wife. And my detectives are looking for any possible angle, like, who did this? And Michael can't provide anything.
Michael was left with chemical burns from the bleach that was poured all over his body. The bleach also destroyed any possible physical evidence the perpetrators could have left on him.
Bleach is the one agent that exists that is guaranteed to destroy DNA. So that's something that the crime lab uses to clean their equipment in between tests. So there's going to be no forensic evidence from Michael that's probably going to be of any value. We've got a description that this might be a white truck or maybe a white panel van. Well, that's probably the most ubiquitous vehicle in the world, right? A white truck. They find no fingerprints out of place. There's nothing at the crime scene which indicates who did this. So there's nobody left their ID, nobody, there's no videotape that shows their faces. So at the very beginning of the investigation, basically, we had nothing.
Matt Murphy says there was one piece of police work the investigators could get started with, but it wasn't appealing. A canvas.
A canvas means you've run out of leads, and you go and you knock on the door of every neighbor in the hopes that maybe somebody saw something, okay? And canvases are a notorious pain in the ass, okay?
The reason Murphy doesn't like canvassing is because it can muddle the investigation. Someone might think they know something, and police time is wasted chasing down a misremembered moment. But Newport PD had nothing to lose. The day they started searching the yellow house, they also knocked on doors on Michael and Mary Street.
First house, nobody has any information that helps. Second house, nobody has anything that helps. Third house, and they start going down the line.
Fourth house, fifth house, then they start all over again, one street over. They knock at the house that shares the back alley with Michael and Mary's house. A woman answers the door.
I always think of, Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched.
Mrs. Kravitz, this time I saw you do it. I caught you red-handed. I was just hanging pictures from 10 feet away. Oh, all along I've
For those old enough to remember that series, Mrs. Kravitz was kind of the neighbor that was always looking out the window, who was sort of paying attention to the neighborhood.
So this woman, we'll call her Mrs. Kravitz, answers the door.
And the officers are like, ma'am, we're investigating a case. We're hoping that maybe you saw something. And you get sort of the typical neighbor, like, as a matter of fact, I did see something.
The three men who stole Michael and Mary from their home hadn't factored Mrs. Kravitz into their plans. She told Newport PD that she saw some unusual activity at Michael and Mary's house hours before the attack happened. And what she tells them will give investigators their first big break.
You heard a ladder in the alley. You went out there and looked through your upstairs second floor window and saw the truck.
That's what I believe I remember, yeah.
Devil in the Desert is a production of ABC Audio, ABC News Studios in 2020. Hosted by me, Matt Gutman, this series was produced by Madeline Wood, Amy Padula, and Kiara Powell. Our supervising producer is Susie Liu, music and mixing by Evan Viola. Special thanks to Liz Alessi, Katie Dendas, Janice Johnston, Eamon McNiff, Jake Lefferman, Katie Muldowney, and Michelle Margulies. Josh Cohan is our director of podcast programming. Laura Mayer is our executive producer.